Hello, this is Yogeshwar 7000 again, and I'm back with another interesting topic in Vedic astrology today. And today we'll be talking about something which is very difficult, okay? And why I say difficult is because it will talk about the kind of death a person will have based on the planetary position in his birth chart, okay? And this is coming directly from the ancient scriptures. It is not a figment of imagination of any modern day astrologer, so I will recommend you to have firm faith in it because it works. And today we'll be talking about a specific example also, which will confirm the accuracy of the ancient scriptures, the sutras, the shlokas, so on and so forth. Okay, so we'll be talking about one particular shloka which is coming from the ancient scriptures, which will describe a particular kind of death. And this is not a very pleasant death we'll be talking about. As we know that in the ancient times, in the times of the kings and the emperors, there were certain kinds of death punishments which were meted out to people who were awarded these sentences for whatever reasons, criminal activities or whatever reasons, sometimes it could not be, it did not base, or it was not rather based on a person being a criminal. It could be a king who conquered another king and a death punishment was meted out to him, or a general of the opposite army, or there could be various reasons in the ancient times. So today we'll be talking about a particular kind of death which was cruel. So you would have read stories that there were people who were trampled under elephants, or they were hanged, or they were shot by a firing squad. And even in modern day times, there are countries, I think in India also, we still have the hanging by death sentencing in extreme cases, although they are trying to get away with that capital punishment. But there are certain countries which still have that very prevalent, or death by a firing squad, or even in the West, there could be death sentence given, and the person is given either poisonous injections or maybe an electric chair like they have in the US. So today we'll be talking about that kind of a combination which can give death in a cruel fashion, like hanging or electric chair, so on and so forth. And the ancient scriptures have described that combination. And the combination which has been described is that in case the Arudha Lagna, and people who are not familiar with Arudha Lagna, please refer to my earlier video on Arudha Lagna as to what Arudha Lagna is and how you find the Arudha Lagna. It's not the normal ascendant of the Lagna, it is an Arudha Lagna, which you will find in my earlier videos if you're not aware of it. So the scriptures say that in case the Arudha Lagna and the third house from Arudha Lagna, the 8th house from Arudha Lagna, and the 11th house from Arudha Lagna are under the influence of malefics, okay? And also increase the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house, which normally you'll see as A7, okay? In a birth chart, in a good software, they describe it as A7. So one is the Arudha Lagna. Find out what the Arudha Lagna is and go third house from the Arudha Lagna, 8th house from the Arudha Lagna, and 11th house from the Arudha Lagna. 3rd, 8th and 11th house from the Arudha Lagna, and the Arudha Lagna itself, if they are under the influence of malefics. And also go to the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house and then go third house from the 7th house Arudha, 8th house from the 7th house Arudha, and 11th house from the 7th house Arudha. So the Arudha of the 7th, 3rd house from the Arudha, 8th house from the Arudha of the 7th, and the 11th house from the Arudha of the 7th. So first once again I'll repeat so that you're not confused. First find out the Arudha Lagna of the main chart, which is the ascendant, and then go the 3rd house from that, go the 8th house from that, and the 11th house from that. Then you go to the 7th house Arudha Lagna, or the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house rather, and then go 3 places from the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house, go 8th house from the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house, and 11th house from the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house. So how many houses are we considering? First the Arudha Lagna itself, so that's 1 house. Then 3rd, 8th and 11th from the Arudha Lagna itself, so these are 4 houses. And then similarly go to the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house, and then 3rd house from the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house, 8th house from the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house, and 11th house from the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house. So these are 8 houses in a birth chart out of the 12 houses, of course. And if these are influenced by malefics, then he will die in a cruel fashion. Okay, it's very rare that all these 8 houses which we are just discussing will be influenced by malefic planets, but you could see out of these 8 houses, 7 houses being influenced by malefic planets, or 6 houses being influenced by these malefic planets. Then of course there is a good probability that he will die in a very cruel fashion, like by hanging, or by by fire, or trampled under the elephants. Mostly this is mentioned in the ancient scriptures as death by hanging. Okay, and death by like an electric shock, electric chair, sometimes fire, sometimes trampled under the elephants, as they used to do in ancient day and ages, killing by the firing squad, so on and so forth. These ways he could die. Okay, so let's look at this chart right here in front of us, and we know that this person was given a death sentence, and he died by hanging. Okay, by the way, this is not the birth chart of Saddam Hussein, who was hanged. This is the chart of Nathuram Godse. Okay, Nathuram Godse, as we all know Nathuram Godse assassinated Mahatma Gandhi, okay, after independence, after India got its independence, and he was awarded the death sentence, and he was hanged for this offense, for this criminal offense. So we know that. We also have the correct birth time, birthplace, and birth date of Nathuram Godse. Okay, so there is no confusion on that, because a lot of people have done research on his birth chart, so on and so forth. So we know his exact time and date of birth and place of birth. Okay, so he was born on May the 19th, 1910. Okay, and his time of birth was 8:30 in the morning. Okay, based on this we have created this birth chart, and his longitude and latitude where he was born was, longitude was 74 degrees and 39 minutes, latitude was 18 degrees and 12 minutes. Latitude was 18 degrees and 12 minutes north, and longitude was 74 degrees and 39 minutes, 74 degrees and 39 minutes east. Okay, so based on this we've created this chart, and let's see whether this shloka, which talks about a cruel kind of a death, especially by hanging, holds true in this birth chart or not. So let's go to the Arudha Lagna first. So the Arudha Lagna of this birth chart is as we know, to calculate the Arudha Lagna. The Arudha Lagna, you count the places, the number of houses from where the Lagna Lord is placed. So it is placed in the 12th house, and then again go 12 houses from the Lagna Lord. So the Arudha Lagna of this birth chart comes in the 11th house where Saturn is placed. Okay, so it fulfills one condition, that Saturn is placed in the Arudha Lagna, and Saturn, as we know, is a major malefic. Okay, and of course in this case it's debilitated as well, so it becomes even more malefic. So we know that. Now we see what is the third house from the Arudha Lagna. So the third house from the Arudha Lagna is the ascendant itself, where Mars is placed. Okay, that's another malefic, so that's another condition which is being fulfilled. Then we see the 8th house from the Arudha Lagna, and the 8th house from the Arudha Lagna, and Arudha Lagna, as we know, is the 11th house we just calculated. The 8th house from the Arudha Lagna has Ketu in it. Okay, so that also fulfills. Ketu is a malefic as well. And then we go to the 11th house from the Arudha Lagna, which is the zodiac sign of Aquarius here. So of course the Lord of the 11th house from the Arudha Lagna is Saturn again. But if you see other planets, let's see the other planets. Yeah, there's no aspect, there's no malefic aspect here. So out of these conditions, the Arudha Lagna, the third house from the Arudha Lagna, the 8th house from the Arudha Lagna, and the 11th house from the Arudha Lagna all have malefics except one. So out of these 4, there are 3 malefics here. Okay, the Arudha Lagna, the third from the Arudha Lagna, the 8th from the Arudha Lagna. So out of 4, 3 malefics. And of course the 11th from the Arudha Lagna also is lorded by Saturn, so we can consider it also as a malefic sign itself. But since there's no planet placed there, there's no influence of a planet, then we can just say that 3 out of 4 houses have malefic influences. Okay, now let's go to the 7th house. So if we go to the 7th house, let's look at the Arudha of the 7th house. So the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house I'm sorry about that, there's a phone call. So the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house is falling in the 10th house, and Venus is exalted here. Okay, so Venus is exalted here, and of course this is not a malefic influence here, so that malefic influence does not hold good in the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house, which is the 10th house where Venus is exalted. So there's no malefic influence here. Let's look at the 3rd house from the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house. So the 3rd house from Arudha Lagna of the 7th house is having Rahu in it, which is a major malefic. Okay, and of course Sun is a hot planet, and Rahu and Sun conjunction is also not a very good combination. It forms a Grahana Yoga or an eclipse yoga. So the 3rd house from the Arudha Lagna of the 7th house is very malefic as well here. So this condition fulfills. Now let's look at the 8th house from the Arura Lagna of the 7th house, which falls in the zodiac sign of Libra, which falls in the 5th house here, where Libra is. Okay, that has a direct influence or aspect of the planet Saturn. Okay, so that also becomes malefic. Okay, and then let's look at the 11th house of the 11th house from the Arura Lagna of the 7th house. So now let's look at the 11th house from the Arura Lagna of the 7th house. So here it falls in the zodiac sign of Capricorn. Now let's see here, the zodiac sign of Capricorn is directly aspected by the planet Mars through its 8th house aspect. So here also a malefic influence comes into play. Okay, and the Mars is aspecting it, and at the same time the planet Saturn is also aspecting the 11th house from the Arura Lagna of the 7th house through its 10th house aspect. So two malefics are aspecting it, which is the planet Mars and the planet Saturn. Okay, so out of these four conditions, the Arura Lagna itself, the 3rd from the Arura Lagna, the 8th from the Arura Lagna, and the 11th from the Arura Lagna, these four conditions, 3 are again fulfilled here. So out of the total 8 houses, out of the 12 houses which we just discussed, 6 houses out of the 8 houses have the influence of malefics. Okay, so this is very clear, you know, like I said, you know, all the 8 houses from the out of the 12 houses cannot have malefic influences, but in this Nathuram Godse's chart, who was hanged to death, out of these 8 houses, 6 houses are under major malefic influences. So this confirms the accuracy of this shloka, which is coming from the ancient scriptures. Okay, so we did discuss, once again, if you're confused, look at the Arura Lagna first, look at the 3rd house from the Arura Lagna, look at the 8th house from the Arura Lagna, and look at the 11th house from the Arura Lagna. Then go to the 7th house, look at the Arura Lagna of the 7th house, look at the 3rd house from the Arura Lagna, look at the 8th house from the Arura Lagna, and look at the 11th house from the Arura Lagna of the 7th house. So these are 8 houses. Okay, and out of these 8 houses, Nathuram Godse's birth chart has malefic influence on 6 houses. Okay, so once again, you know, I always keep saying that, you know, the ancient scriptures can never be wrong. So have firm faith and belief in it and follow astrology based on ancient scriptures. You know, a lot of videos are being floated on the internet these days, and a lot of modern day astrologers are saying things which do not relate to the ancient scriptures, and that is the reason why their predictions and their analysis can sometimes go off, and that is the reason why people are losing faith. And that's the reason why people are losing faith in astrology, and they say no, it does not work. But it does work. It just requires a lot of hard work, you know, going deeper into the ancient scriptures. Do not believe in what the modern day astrologers are saying based on their own whims and fancies, and you will start to believe in Vedic astrology. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed this video, and in the meanwhile I will recommend subscribe to my channel and check out my website. There is a link below, and I will see you with an interesting topic in Vedic astrology in my next session very soon. Goodbye.